Once hailed as the empire on which the sun never sets, the United Kingdom now finds itself at an alarming economic crossroads. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, the UK led the world in industry, innovation, and global trade. London was the financial capital of the world, British manufacturing was unmatched, and the country's influence stretched across continents. But fast forward to 2025, and a grim reality is setting in. Soaring inflation, broken public services, food banks feeding working families, and stagnant wages have started to paint a different picture. For many citizens and economists alike, the question is no longer if the UK is declining, but rather how far it will fall. The term Third World may be controversial and outdated, but in the context of economic struggles, it now represents the erosion of living standards, systemic poverty, and weak infrastructure that the UK is gradually exhibiting. And while the UK still maintains global recognition, its economic trajectory is ringing alarm bells for millions. The cost of living crisis. At the heart of the UK's economic unraveling is the brutal cost of living crisis. Energy bills have more than doubled since 2021. Rent prices in major cities like London and Manchester are skyrocketing, while home ownership is increasingly out of reach for younger generations. Grocery prices have surged by over 20% in just 2 years, making even basic necessities a luxury for working-class families. A country where millions now rely on food banks cannot be considered economically strong. According to the Trussell Trust, over 3 million emergency food parcels were handed out in 2023 to 2024, a record number. This is not happening in a post-war famine zone, but in one of the G7 countries. Thousands of teachers, nurses, and even junior doctors, once considered middle-class professions, now rely on second jobs or government assistance to survive. Is this what a developed economy looks like? Public services in collapse, NHS in crisis. The UK's National Health Service, NHS, once the pride of the nation and a model for public healthcare around the world, is on the brink of collapse. Staff shortages, long waiting lists, and underfunding have left millions without timely treatment. It's not uncommon for patients to wait 12 to 18 hours in overcrowded emergency rooms. Some surgeries are being postponed for months or even years, while mental health services are drastically under-resourced. This is no longer a hiccup in service, it's a systemic failure. According to data from the British Medical Association, over 40,000 nurses left the profession in the past year due to low pay and burnout. Ambulance delays, staff strikes, and medicine shortages are becoming the norm. Education cuts and brain drain. The decline isn't limited to healthcare. British education, too, is suffering severe setbacks. University fees remain sky-high, student debt is unmanageable, and funding cuts are impacting everything from school meals to classroom resources. Austerity has ravaged the education system, especially in poorer areas where children have to share textbooks and even basic school supplies. What's worse? The UK is losing its talent. Thousands of highly educated British citizens, doctors, engineers, scientists, and even students, are now moving abroad for better opportunities. Australia, Canada, Germany, and even the UAE have become top destinations for young British professionals seeking higher pay, better healthcare, and a more secure future. This growing brain drain is stripping the UK of its most vital asset, human capital. Industrial decline and the ghost towns of the north. Decades of deindustrialization have turned once thriving northern towns like Sheffield, Sunderland, and Stoke-on-Trent into economic graveyards. Steelworks, coal mines, and textile factories have vanished. What's left behind? Empty high streets, boarded-up pubs, and crumbling infrastructure. These regions are now among the poorest in Western Europe, with youth unemployment rates soaring over 20% in some areas. The government's promises of leveling up seem more like empty rhetoric. Billions in funding have been promised, but little has materialized. Meanwhile, investment continues to be concentrated in London and the South East, widening the wealth gap between the country's richest and poorest regions. Political instability and the Brexit backlash. Brexit was supposed to be the moment the UK reclaimed its sovereignty, its economy, and its global standing. Instead, it has brought years of political instability, trade disruptions, and economic fragmentation. The UK's departure from the EU has led to customs checks, border friction, and decreased foreign investment. British businesses that once freely exported goods across Europe are now burdened with red tape and rising costs. Foreign investors are pulling out. Small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, are collapsing. According to the Office for National Statistics, the UK's economic growth has consistently underperformed that of other G7 nations since Brexit. Even the British pound has lost its strength, hovering at its lowest levels in decades. The leadership crisis, with 4 prime ministers in just 6 years, has only deepened public distrust and market uncertainty. The rise of working poverty and zero-hour jobs. Today in Britain, having a job doesn't mean you're safe from poverty. The rise of zero-hour contracts and gig economy jobs has redefined what it means to be employed. Workers at companies like Amazon, Deliveroo, and Uber struggle with insecure contracts, low pay, and no employment rights. Some workers are clocking in 60 hours a week just to meet rent and food expenses. According to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, over 14 million people in the UK live in poverty. That's more than 1/5 of the population. Nearly half of all children in single-parent families live below the poverty line. This isn't just a crisis, it's a breakdown of the social contract. Housing crisis and urban inequality. The housing market in the UK is broken. Home prices are completely detached from average incomes, particularly in London and the South East. First-time buyers are effectively locked out unless they have wealthy parents or huge inheritances. Social housing waiting lists stretch for years, while homelessness is increasing even in smaller towns and cities. You now see tents under bridges in Manchester, homeless encampments in Birmingham, and families living in cramped hostels for months in London. Rough sleeping in England has increased by more than 70% since 2010. The image of modern Britain is now one of inequality, decay, and disillusionment. Wealth concentration and corporate power. While millions struggle to survive, the UK's wealthiest have grown richer. Billionaires are buying mansions in central London, while offshore companies continue to profit from the UK's crumbling infrastructure. From water companies dumping raw sewage into rivers to energy firms raising bills during record profits, corporate exploitation has worsened national inequality. The government, critics argue, has done little to regulate or tax these excesses. Instead, austerity measures continue to hurt ordinary people while the super-rich flourish. The loss of global relevance. Economically, diplomatically, and culturally, the UK is losing influence. Once a pillar of global policy making, it now struggles to define its role in the international order. The loss of EU partnerships, reduced trade leverage, and diminished military capacity all signal a shrinking presence. Many former colonies and partner nations, like India, Kenya, and even Ireland, now see the UK as a fading power. Its economy has slipped in global rankings, and its voice on the world stage is becoming quieter by the day. A future at risk. The transformation of the UK from a global empire to a struggling economy wasn't inevitable, it was the result of political mismanagement, economic inequality, and institutional neglect. If the current trajectory continues, the UK risks losing its developed nation status. The poverty, infrastructure failures, and social unrest that once seemed unimaginable in Britain are now becoming reality. But the decline is not irreversible. With bold reforms, investment in public services, and a shift in economic policy, the UK can still reinvent itself. Yet the window is closing, and fast. The world is watching to see whether the UK will rise again, or continue its fall into what many are now calling a third world reality.